Western media keeps telling you that October 7th is unprovoked. But what if I told you that the real reason why Hamas attacked Israel lies in something deeper than what you already know?
This was an unprovoked attack.
The attack on October 7th was unprovoked.
October 7th was unprovoked.
Stay tuned for us to uncover the truth of what actually happened and peel off the layers of propaganda on the Levant. To begin, let's first understand the context. Starting off about 10 months before October 7, we begin on January 2023 when Israel swears in its most right-wing coalition in its history. 6 days later after that, Justice Minister Devine unveils a wildly controversial plan that, check this, aims at changing Israel's law to give the cabinet ministers of Israel the power to appoint their own judges and eliminates the ability of the Supreme Court to strike down any decisions of the government that it deems as unreasonable. This triggers wild protests all across Tel Aviv that go up to 150,000 people that march the streets because they're scared that this decision will affect Israel's democracy. By February 2023, Finance Minister Smotrich, a man who calls for the erasure of Palestinian towns, is given the additional role of the Minister of Settlements. This role gives them sweeping authority of approving, establishing, and expanding illegal settlements in the West Bank. By March 2023, the Security Minister of Israel, Ben Gvir, a man who's convicted of supporting the US-labeled terrorist organization, the Gag, is given expansive powers to oversee Israeli police in the West Bank. With these two cabinet ministers working hand in hand, we have on one side an increasing number of illegal settlements happening in the West Bank under the vision of Smotrich, and you have increasing number of settler violence that is not being held accountable under Ben Gvir's oversight. In a leaked meeting in June 2023, Smotrich discusses the strategy of using civilians rather than the state to annex illegal lands. To him, he said it, quote, would be easier to swallow in the international and legal context if it was not carried out by the state. This gave extremist organizations like the Hilltop Youth the confidence to openly raid Palestinian towns, including the notable example of Termis Aya, where settlers set 15 homes on fire and destroyed property and agriculture with no legal retribution. By June 2023, the Israeli government had already approved the establishment of more than 12,800 housing units in the West Bank, which are completely illegal under international law. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Human Affairs, before October 7th, there was a total of 798 settler attacks with 234 Palestinians killed and more than 1,300 structures that were destroyed in the West Bank and East Jerusalem illegally. So why are these violations of international law and the killing of innocent civilians and the violations of human rights not usually talked about in the media when it comes to this conflict? Well, first we have to understand that the decision to increase illegal settlements in the West Bank, as Smotrich puts it very clearly, is a strategy to block the establishment of the Palestinian state. Increasing the number of settlements in the West Bank where Palestinians reside means that there can be no territorial continuity of Palestinian authority, which massively reduces the hopes of the internationally accepted UN-backed two-state solution. Smotrich also believes in the concept of Greater Israel and has openly boasted that Israel should extend into Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia.
בשלב הזה או שבעצם אנחנו גם יוצאים את עבר הירדן, בשלב הבא? בסדר, לאט לאט. כתוב בחז"ל שעתידה ישראל, עתידה ירושלים להתרחב עד דמשק. זאת אומרת, אנחנו רק ירושלים, עד דמשק.
Therefore, it comes with no surprise that with Israel's recent war in Lebanon, we see groups such as the South Lebanon Settlement Movement advertising future real estate on a foreign land. But how does any of this explain why Hamas attacked Israel? Well, with illegal settlements now on the rise and more Palestinians facing home demolitions and settler violence, the average Palestinian living in the West Bank starts to lose hope in the ability of the Palestinian Authority, which is the official government representative of the West Bank, to actually be able to protect its own citizens and to be able to protect the idea of a two-state solution. This comes at a time where the Palestinian Authority is receiving a lot of criticism for sightings of corruption, nepotism, and lack of transparency. So Hamas starts to see these cracks as an opportunity to rebrand itself as a fighter for the Palestinian cause. And according to the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, Hamas actually gained 6% more popularity after October 7th by Palestinians than it did than before. And now over 90% of Palestinians believe that President Mahmoud Abbas from the Palestinian Authority should resign. This comes at a time where Palestinians are starting to become more sympathetic with the use of a armed resistance because they're citing feelings of helplessness with the lack of international accountability for Israel's violations and atrocities. But what if I told you that shifting the power towards Hamas and weakening the Palestinian Authority was actually a strategic plan that was pushed by the Israeli government to present the Palestinian representatives as unreliable partners and extremists that you can't negotiate with for a two-state solution? The proof of that is that Smotrich said in an interview in 2015 that the Palestinian Authority is a burden, Hamas is an asset. It's a terrorist organization no one will recognize, no one will give it status at the International Criminal Court, and no one will let it put forth a resolution at the UN Security Council. Netanyahu said at the Likud Party conference in 2019 that, quote, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. This is part of our strategy to keep Hamas and the Palestinian Authority separate and prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. Former Prime Minister Olmert even stated in 2023 that in the last 15 years, I quote, Israel did everything to downgrade the Palestinian Authority and to boost Hamas, end quote. While I understand that Israel probably let Hamas brew as a strategy to fracture Palestinian control and end the two-state solution, I still don't understand why they would ignore a 40-page document known as the Jericho Wall that details exactly what Hamas will be doing on October 7th, from the use of drones, from the taking of hostages, from the jumping of the border fence. Why did Netanyahu brush that off as aspirational? Even Israeli border guards who were surveying the area of Gaza saw the training of Hamas soldiers trying to blow up border posts at several locations and enter Israeli territory, yet Netanyahu ignored this as an imaginary scenario. Why? Could it be that Israel wanted Hamas to attack it? According to Hamas's own statements, attacking Israel is partly motivated by the increasing normalization between the Arab countries and Israel itself, especially that of Saudi Arabia, which was coming on the horizon close to October 7th. A week before October 7th, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman admitted on a US interview that every day we get closer with an agreement between Saudi and Israel. Now, this posed a threat to Hamas in two ways. First, the alliances between Arab nations and Israel were not including the Palestinian Authority as a representative nor the Palestinian cause as part of the agreement. So this was regarded by Palestinians that the increasing number of alliances and normalization only equals a dimming of the possibility of them having self-sovereignty and human rights. Second, the Saudi-Israeli normalization deal was coming with a mega project that would topple Iran's influence in the region, and since Hamas is financed by Iran, this involves Hamas as well. So in September 2023, check this out, Netanyahu presents IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. IMEC is a project that basically links the trade routes all the way from India to Europe through land and shipping corridors in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. With Saudi and Iran always having gone head-to-head over the past few decades for control over the Middle East through proxy wars, an alliance between Saudi and Israel would massively topple Iran's influence and decrease its political relevance. For Matthew Levitt of the Washington Institute says, quote, obstructing Israel's diplomatic efforts with Saudi Arabia was a primary motivator for Hamas's attack, end quote. In other words, Hamas's attack is aimed at deterring the normalization agreements between Israel and Saudi Arabia because it fears that shifting geopolitical dynamics away from Iran's favor would diminish its influence as a result. For better or worse, the strategy actually worked for Iran because Saudi Arabia did indeed pull away from the normalization agreements and started increasing more asks from Israel regarding the reality and the concrete details of a future Palestinian state. Lastly, Hamas says that it attacked Israel partially because of the religious provocations that happened on August 13, 2023, where Ben Gvir, a few months before October 7th, leads more than 2,000 Jews into the Al-Aqsa compound and calls for prayer in that area. To understand why this is seen as provocative, we have to understand that the Temple Mount, or the Al-Aqsa compound, is the place where the Temple of Solomon once stood proud. The Temple of Solomon was destroyed twice, and on the second time it was destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, and since then it was never rebuilt. Therefore, the chief rabbi of Israel bans Jews from walking on the Al-Aqsa compound of the Temple Mount in fear that they could come into contact with the Holy of Holies, which is the most sacred part of the ancient Temple of Solomon that requires proper purification to come into contact with it. And that proper purification involves the sacrifice of a red heifer. Therefore, Ben Gvir's storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque not only violated the chief rabbi of Israel's recommendations, but also threatens the status quo agreement that was respected since 1967, which prohibits non-Muslim prayer at that site. In addition, the Temple Institute, which is an organization in Israel, check this, that outspokenly calls for the demolishment of the Aqsa Mosque to make way for the building of the new temple, goes on to import 5 red heifers and begins to conduct mock trials and prepare priests for ceremonies. So Hamas starts to see this as a provocation that indeed the destruction of the Al-Aqsa compound is imminent, and it's also partly why Hamas called its operation Operation Al-Aqsa Storm. Therefore, when you hear the phrase October 7th was unprovoked, remember to peel off the layers of propaganda and realize it was provoked by the following 5 reasons. Number 1, the increasing right-wing government that sought to do judicial reforms and decrease the influence of the Supreme Court on it so that it can go unchecked, which Tel Aviv residents were protesting. Number 2, the increasing settler violence in the West Bank, the increasing home demolitions, and the increasing illegal annexation of land. Number 3, the strategic empowerment of Hamas to Israel that happened and the weakening of the Palestinian Authority that was purposeful. Number 4, the Arab-Israeli normalization deals that did not include the Palestinian voice or the Palestinian struggle. And number 5, the religious provocations that broke the status quo in the Aqsa compound. These 5 reasons showed why the phrase October 7th was unprovoked as propaganda. If you share this vision and you want to be among some of the smartest people from the Levant, who are Christian, Muslim, and Jew, that want to make a difference for the future of the region and want to create a space for us all to live and coexist peacefully, click on this link below and let's see you there.